see my screen, Yvonne?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, first of all, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very delighted here to be invited by FSMOne to be the speaker for tonight's webinar. I'm very delighted to share with you our thoughts on retirement savings. The topic for today, as mentioned by Yvonne, is actually, retirement savings. Is enough really enough? First of all, let's look at, the Malaysia retirement landscape. When it comes to retirement, the first thing that comes in mind to most Malaysian, is really the word EPF. While EPF, is the main retirement savings for most Malaysian, EPF, could also be the sole retirement savings, for most of the Malaysian. But is that really the case? So let's really look into, some of the data that we have here on screen. So if you look into the population of Malaysia, you will realize that Malaysia actually have a population of 32.7 million. While we look into the working age group, which is really those people who are age 15 and above, this will tweak down the population to 30.8 million. But when we look into the actual labor force, which means, you take away those who are students, who are retiree, who are housewife and all, the labor force is actually left to be about, 15.9 million. And out of that, a good 93% of this labor force are actually members of the EPF. So this is due to the nature of the mandatory, where all employees are required to be registered with EPF and contribute to EPF. The remainders are actually those who do not need to contribute to EPF, probably because they are business owners, they're in the gig economy, they are freelancers or even store owners and things like that. But what's more, important is actually to look at the bottom chart. While we said that there are actually about 14.8 million, registered members with EPF, only about 50% of them, which is 7.49 million members, are actively, contributing. These are what we call the active members. While most Malaysians will say that, EPF, we refer to EPF as their main retirement savings and also probably even the sole retirement savings. But actually, really, there are only 7.49 million people who are actively saving, which means from a Malaysian total population perspective, what are, the retirement savings for the remainder outside of this 7 million? Now, let's look into, the balances of the savings in EPF. Is your mandatory retirement savings really enough? So what we do is we take a look into the average savings for EPF members at the age of 54. So at the age of 54, currently, EPF has a total member of 245,892 with a total savings of 29.03 billion. If you average out, the average savings for this group of people is actually at 108,060 ringgit. Out of these 245,000, there are only 94,000 over 871 members who are active. And these active members, has a total savings of 21.61 billion. If you average this out, their average savings is really, only at 227,860 ringgit. Do remember this number because we will be referring to this number in the next couple of slides as well. But really what I want to show to you is that, PPA has recommended basic savings, which is really the bare minimum saving that we should have for retirement purposes. And these numbers stood at 240,000 at the age of 55. But if you compare these 240,000 against the average savings that we have here, on an overall basis and for active members, you realize that there is really a gap. There's a shortfall between this number, especially on an overall basis. What's more worrying is that, if you look into the total balances for all the active members in EPF, you realize that only 30% of the active members actually have more than 50,000 in their balances, which means 70% of the active members, 70% of that 7.49 million active members, actually have less than 50,000. So is 50,000 really enough for your retirement? Well, it may be enough for some people, but definitely not enough for you to retire comfortably. When it comes to retirement, we also need to determine, how long that retirement savings can sustain us. In determining that, we need to know what is the life expectancy for average Malaysian. The Department of Statistics Malaysia, indicated 2 life expectancy for Malaysian. One is at birth and the other one is at the age of 60 years old. At birth, an average Malaysian male, will have a life expectancy of 73.2 years, while female at 78.3 years. These give an average of 76 years for life expectancy for Malaysians at birth. If the person retires at age 55, then the retirement savings, will need to last for 21 years. If the person retires at 60 years old, then the retirement savings will need to last for up to 16 years. Looking at the life expectancy, at age 60, at age 60, then the life expectancy is actually slightly longer. For male, the life expectancy then, increases to 78.9 years, while female increases to 80.35 years. So these gives an average of 80 years as a, average life expectancy for Malaysian. So if the person retires at 55, then the retirement savings needs to last up to 25 years. If the person retires at 60, the retirement savings needs to last for 20 years. In short, our retirement savings, needs to sustain for a very long time. We're looking at an average of about 20 years for an average Malaysian. Now look into, how long can these, savings or the balances that we have in the EPF can sustain us. Earlier, we showed you the active members' balances, and the average of it, derive, a figure of 227,860. We have also shown you, the life expectancy of average Malaysian, which at birth, give an average of 76 years old. With that in mind, we compute it, and we put an assumption that these balances at EPF continue to grow at 5%. And what is the amount, that we're looking at a per month basis for each, of these investors. So assuming a balance of 227,000, for 76 years, up to 76 years old, the investors, or rather the contributor, the EPF members actually have a monthly savings of 1,404, to last them until they are 76 years old. Is this amount enough? Okay. Many of us, will say that, depending on your lifestyle, but most of us will say that it is not enough. We will also, compare these numbers against other numbers to ensure, and to gauge its sufficiency. So first thing we look at is actually the national poverty line. Poverty line income at national level is actually at 2,208 per month. And if you compare this to the 1,404 savings per month from the EPF, there is a shortfall. So this indicates that the balances in the EPF saving is actually not enough. Further, we also refer to the estimation, of monthly expenses for old couple. This is actually derived from Belanjawan Crew, in 2019, which shows that as a old couple, the monthly expenses that is required is, 3,090. If you average it out for the two, it's about 1,005. Even, at that, your 1,400 per month, is actually not enough. To add on, there's also these 3 realities that we want to share with you from a retirement perspective. Firstly, 2 out of 3 of the EPF members can only spend, less than 950 ringgit per month until the age 75. And 7 out of 10 of EPF members can only spend less than 210 per month until the age of 75. On top of that, for those who have, a lump sum, at their EPF savings and they take it out, at retirement, what we witness is that most of them tend to exhaust, all their retirement savings within the first 3 to 5 years. As we can see earlier, of life expectancy, will take us all the way up to 76 years old, and the retirement savings needs to sustain us, for a good 20 years. If we exhaust, within the 3 to 5 years, what's going to happen for the remaining years? And this reality, is really worrying. On top of that, as for any other thing, retirement also has its own challenges. We reduce, retirement challenges really to 4 main challenges. Firstly is longevity. If you look into the life expectancy at birth by gender, you realize that, Malaysians, as with any other, people around the world, has been living longer and longer. This is probably due to all the developments and all in the medical, healthcare, as well as better food and nutrition. So people are actually living longer and longer. In Malaysia, a female in the year of 2000 have a life expectancy of 74.6. In 2010, this life expectancy increases to 76.6, and in 2020, this number increases to 77.6. Similarly, for a male, in year 2000, their life expectancy is actually at 70. In 2010, it increases to 71.9, and in 2020, this number increases to 74.9. So on average, Malaysian actually is living longer and longer, which is a good thing. But, from a retirement perspective, are we outliving the retirement savings that we have? Because the longer that we live, which means we will need more money to sustain our retirement life. Secondly, second challenges that we have is actually on the shortfall. We briefly mentioned about this earlier. So we look at the basic recommended savings, of 240,000, and we compare it to the balances, that we have in the EPF. Why we look at EPF is because, for most Malaysian, EPF remains as the main retirement savings, and for most, it is also the only or the sole retirement savings. So if you look at the active members and the overall balances, you will see that there is a good amount of shortfall here. And this is just comparing, to the number of basic recommended savings, which is just a minimal number, So question from here is, even if we cannot meet the, basics recommended savings, is it enough for us to really retire? The third challenge is actually on demographic change. One of it is actually on the sandwich generation. So what is this sandwich generation? So typically sandwich generation is actually a generation of people between the age, of 40 to 50 who needs to provide financial care for both the elderly and also their children. So as a result, they are sandwiched between, the two generations, having to have that financial responsibility for 3 different generations, the elderly, themselves, and also the children. Okay. On top of that, fertility rate has also been dropping. So in 1970, the fertility rate on average is actually 4.9 babies. But when it comes to year 2020, this fertility rate dropped to 1.8 babies. What implication does it have, from a retirement perspective? Is really, taking care of your parents. So if I'm not sure how, your family is like, but for myself, you can witness that, my mother has a sibling of 15, while for myself is 2, but I only have 1 child. So it's a clear progression on how, people are also having, lesser children, lesser babies, and things like that. So what it means is that in the past, to take care of an elderly, the shared responsibility will be shared among the siblings. So the financial burden is not that heavy. So assuming, you have 10 siblings and, the 10 siblings is taking care of the elderly, each of them probably, will only be looking at, financially, from a financial perspective, a 10% contribution. If you have only 2 siblings, it's a 50% contribution from a financial perspective. And, as we can see in year 2020, the number goes down, to less than 2, which means, if you are a single child, that sole responsibility will lie with you. You have a 100% financial responsibility on your parents. Last but not least, on the retirement challenges is inflation. Inflation, is not a new concept. A lot of people will know. It is about, losing the purchasing power over time due to increase in prices. But where it comes from is that, these increases, in prices have an impact on our retirement savings. So here I put some examples on some of the real inflation rate. for, some of the items. Property prices has grown 12%, food 5%, healthcare 19%, education 5%, insurance 25%. So what it means is that, whatever that we have saved today for our retirement savings, is it really enough to sustain us, when we retire? Because we all know when we are saving for retirement today, we are saving it for a good 20, 30 years so that it can last us when we retire. So at that point in time, whatever amount that you're looking at, can it still sustain to give you, the ability to maintain your lifestyle? With all that said, we note that there is a need to save for retirement. And in fact, there is a need to save extra for retirement. With that, the government of Malaysia has in 2012 introduced, PRS as part of the Pillar 3. What is this Pillar 3? So in Malaysian pension system, we actually adopt a multi-pillar framework, which is recommended by the World Bank. So in Malaysia, out of that 5 pillars, we adopt 4 pillars. So Pillar 0, is aimed for poverty eradication. And these are things like, social assistance schemes, such as our BRIM and also Bantuan Orang Tua. We don't have Pillar 1 in Malaysia, but Pillar 2 is the most common one that we see in Malaysia. It has an aim, for income replacement. And, many of these companies are also, adopting to this. It is a mandatory scheme, but it is not funded by the government. Okay, so WAP, LTAT, our EPF, SOCSO, and even public-private pension schemes are all falling under Pillar 2 with the aim to provide income replacement. Pillar 3 is on a voluntary basis. It's a contribution on a voluntary basis, and the objective of Pillar 3 is really to provide extra income. So here, like I mentioned earlier, in 2012, the Malaysian government has actually introduced, PRS, as a supplement to EPF to provide this extra income to the Malaysian. Because we note that, the balances in EPF is really not enough, and there is a need to have this supplement program. The need to save, for retirement also doesn't just ride on having a supplement program. The need also, is there for us to start early, because one of the most powerful tools, in savings for retirement is really on taking the benefits, reaping the benefits of compounding return. To know what is the benefits, I have put here, 2 simulations. If you look at simulation 1, we give a comparison for investors at different age. Investor at the age of 20 years old, which is a young investor, is only putting, a savings of 120 ringgit per month. A 40-year-old putting a savings of 200 ringgit per month, and 50-year-old, putting a saving of 400 per month. So we route it and we compute the balances, the accumulated savings, at the age of 60. Based on an estimated rate of return. At the rate of return of 7%, you can see that the 20-year-old will have accumulated savings of 314,000 as compared, to a 9% return at 561,000. And at 11%, this number actually grows to above 1 million. The 40-year-old guy, who puts actually more than the 20-year-old at 200 ringgit per month, at the same rate of return of 7, actually only have an accumulated savings of 104,000. So you can see that although 40-year-old guy, put an amount that is bigger, but because, the younger investors save for a longer period of time, they enjoy, better, compounding returns. And therefore, the accumulated savings is actually much more than the 40-year-old. So similarly, if you look into the examples here for the 50-year-old, you can see that despite the 50-year-old putting 400 ringgit compared to the 20-year-old who put 120 ringgit per month, the amount, on an accumulated basis in their savings is actually much, much lower than that of the 20 ringgit. This is a clear example, to show the compounding return. Because why every dollar that, you put in earlier will earn you interest, and you earn interest on top of interest. This is what we call, in other words, this is what we call the snowball effect as well. Simulation 2 is the other way of looking at things. So here we took an example of 2,000 contribution per year with a return of 8%. So we have two scenarios here to show you. One is where you start early and the other one is where you start later. Scenario 1, where you start early, we assume that these investors actually invest 2,000 per year for the first 10 years. The remaining 15 years, they did not invest anything. And at the end, the accumulated savings is actually 99,000. Second scenario, same 25-year investment period. First 10 years, the investor didn't invest anything, but they only put in 2,000 per year from the year 11 onwards. But instead of putting 10 years, they put 15 years. So from a capital perspective, the start later actually contributed capital of 30,000, as compared to the start early at 20,000. But the accumulated return, accumulated savings, at the end of the 25 years is still much lower than the one who starts earlier. This shows that the sooner you get started, the more returns are compounded. So how do you save extra for your retirement savings? I have here a short video, and let's watch the short video. When it comes to determining how much we need to save, one of the most common terms we need to know is actually on income replacement ratio. So what is this income replacement ratio? It is simply, a percentage of pre-retirement income that you need to maintain your lifestyle after you stop working. So for most of the EOCD countries, the numbers that they're looking at on the average is actually 57%. But for Malaysia, our current income replacement ratio is only at 30%. So what this means is that most Malaysians, after they have stopped working, they are not able to maintain their lifestyle as what they used to be. The recommended, income replacement ratio that we should have is really 2/3 or 67% as per what you have watched in the video. So when determining how much, you need for when you retire, there are really two simple methods that you can look at. The first one is what we have shown you in the video. In simple terms is to say, save 1/3 today, to get 2/3 when you retire, right? So you will need 67% as per the income replacement ratio on your last withdrawn salary so that you can maintain your pre-retirement lifestyle. And to do that, you need to save 33% or 1/3 of your monthly income now to achieve that. So how do you do that? In Malaysia, actually, it's not really that difficult to do because most of us has EPF, and a large portion of this 33% would have been contributed through the mandatory scheme of EPF. Why? Because EPF have two legs to it. One is the employer contribution and the employee contribution. So employer contributes 12% to EPF savings, and employee, you yourself would have contributed, 11% from our salary deduction into EPF. That itself would have contributed to 23% on our savings to retirement. So really to meet this 1/3 or 33%, you just need to save an extra 10% on a monthly basis. And these can go into PRS as a supplement program to your EPF. Method 2, in determining on how much you need for retirement is really based on, how much you plan to spend during your retirement. So first of all, you need to determine what is your desired monthly expenses. You need to list down, what are your expenses that you intend to spend. derive at that desired monthly expenses amount. Once you know what is your monthly expenses amount, you can then, times by the number of months and also the number of years, to determine what is the total amount that you need. Compare this amount with your EPF savings. In this example here, we have used 227,860, which is the average savings, for the active members age 54. You will then know what is the shortfall, and from the shortfall, you can then work backward to determine what is your age and therefore how much you need to contribute on a monthly basis. So typically, these are the two common methods that people use in the market, to determine how much, they need when they retire. So what is PRS? PRS, or Private Retirement Scheme, has been offered as a supplement to the EPF. It is sitting in the pillar 3 of our Malaysian pension system. It is really, a scheme that is governed by the trust for the purpose of building a long-term savings for retirement. Similar to EPF, retirement savings in PRS is also split into two accounts, sub-account A and sub-account B. Sub-account A represents 70%, and it is a lock-in until 55 years old, which means you're not allowed to withdraw from this portion of savings. And sub-account B is 30%. You may withdraw before 55 years old, subject to some terms and conditions, such as, for education, healthcare, death, and things like that. You may also withdraw without any reason, but that will be subject to a tax penalty of 8%. Some people will look at this, lock-in feature, as a disadvantage, but I beg to differ. Why? Because if you look at EPF, that's how it works. You're not allowed to take out the money subject to a certain criteria. But at the end of it, when you retire, when you reach your age of 55, you do get a lump sum. And this lump sum will help you, to save. Not only that, as a human, our nature, tend to be tempted by a lot of our short-term goals. Retirement is a long-term goal that could be 30 or 40 years, for some of us. But there will be a lot of temptation from our short-term goals that may tempt us to actually take out the money to spend for our short-term goals. For example, you may be tempted to actually change your phone to the new iPhone or even go for a holiday. So, we tend to neglect sometimes the goal for a longer term purposes. So this lock-in feature is actually good in the sense that it forces us to save for a long term. PRS, like I mentioned, is actually not a competitor to your EPF. It is actually a supplemental program that complements well with all your other retirement savings, whether it is your QAP, EPF, your employer-sponsored program, your annuity, it complements well as an additional and a supplement, to the programs that you already have. What other benefits of PRS? PRS also provide you with diversification. As you know, in Finance 101, we have always been taught, never to put all your eggs in one basket. So similarly, for your retirement savings, it's also good for you to diversify. So to put into PRS, it is also, an added diversification. PRS is also designed for long term. As I mentioned, it has the lock-in feature to help you, to have that discipline, to keep savings, for your retirement. PRS also have fund choices for you. Apart from, EPF, where you put in, where you do not get that ability to choose what investment you want to make. But in PRS, you get to choose, your own investment. You get to just select which funds you want to go based on your risk profile, or even non-core, based on your choice. Okay. PRS usually also comes with, features like regular savings plans, which actually really helps, you to have the discipline to instill the saving habits for you to enjoy that compounding interest. On top of that, PRS, also offer you tax benefit. This is, for both the personal and corporate. Today, the personal tax benefit has been extended all the way to the year of assessment 2025. So every year, for a contribution up to 3,000 ringgit, you are actually eligible for tax benefit, which, calculated depending on your tax bracket, which can equate to up to 840 ringgit per year. From a employer perspective, from a corporate perspective, any additional contribution on top of, the mandatory contribution to EPF up to 19% are also eligible for tax deduction. At principle, we believe in offering, a retirement solution through PRS, and we have been doing that since the offering of PRS by the government in end of 2012. So today is about, close to 9 years, and we have both, conventional and Islamic schemes for the investors. We are also there, to offer you choices in both the Do It For Me as well as the Do It Myself. Do It For Me is, or what we call the default program under the SC guidelines, is really, allowing us to put you into the right fund based on your age. Asset allocation of these funds are actually fixed, as per the SC guidelines. So for each of the conventional and Islamic, we have 3 funds there: growth, moderate, and conservative. Typically, younger investors will be put into growth as your main intention is really to grow your wealth. And as you move, nearer to your retirement date, you will actually be moved from one fund to another, as you're in, and your intention, in growing your fund is different. Do It Myself, as per the name, is really for self-selection. So here we offer you choices of funds. So you are free to select whichever funds that suits your risk profile or suits your needs based on, your choice. You can mix and match, as this is a self-selection. So here at Principal, we have 5 choices of funds for you in conventional as well as Islamic. So in addition to the growth, moderate, and conservative, we also have the PRS Plus Equity, as well as the Asia Pack in both the Islamic and conventional. How have funds, been performing? Because PRS is actually for long term. So personally, I tend to look at it from a longer term performance perspective. I typically look at, above 5 years and also since inception. So for us, because the fund has been launched, since end of 2012, which is about 9 years, since inception, you can see that this is how the fund has performed. The best performing fund for us, is really at the Asia Pack, which delivers over 100% of the return in that 9 years. We have also provided income distribution, the latest one being, in October, 14 October, recently, for most of our funds, all of our funds. So here, is the list of, some of the distribution rates that we have made. However, as per the SC guideline, we are not able to give a payment out for this income distribution. So this income distribution is actually being reinvested. On the market outlook side, going forward, at Principal, we believe that, these 3 structural trends will continue to support Asia. And hence, we are positive, on Asia. The 3 trends are technology adoption, resilient domestic focused earnings, as well as income opportunity. On technology adoptions, we're really looking at, IT hardware and semiconductor company, China, Taiwan, which have been global market leaders for 5Gs, moving towards, electrical vehicles. And we believe that all these will also keep the demand for hardware, in Asia, and therefore supporting, the outlook in Asia. On resilient domestic focused earnings, since 2009, Asian companies, with a strong domestic focus have quadrupled their earnings, and outperforming a lot of the export-oriented businesses. So these domestic earnings have actually shown significantly less volatility as well. On income opportunity, global investors have really been looking beyond, where their own location is to find positive real yields. And, from that perspective, Asia, is actually very attractive to them, given, our high dividend stocks and also the pickup, on the yield. If you look at, between Asian bonds as well as the Euro bonds or the US bonds, you realize that there is actually a pickup of about 2 to 3%. Therefore, we believe that with these 3 structural trends in place, we are positive on Asia. With that, The fund focus for us, for now is really, the two Asia Pac fund that we have, one in the conventional and one in Islamic. The conventional one is the principal PRS plus Asia Pac ex-Japan equity, which seeks to provide capital growth over the long term by investing in Asia Pac ex-Japan region. This is actually a feeder fund that fits into our flagship principal Asia Pac, Asia Pacific Dynamic Income, or APDI. So if you look at the performance, of this fund, since inception, it has actually, provided a cumulative return of more than 167% versus benchmark of 98%. The focus, of the fund is very much on large cap and high quality stocks that exhibits, strong growth potential or good earnings visibility. Similarly, Principal Islamic PRS plus Asia Pacific Fund, is offering, investment into Sharia-based investing. It is also seek to provide capital growth over the long term by investing into Asia Pac ex-Japan. Again, this is also a feeder fund and it fits into our Principal Islamic Asia Pacific Dynamic Equity Fund. So since inception, this fund has actually provided a cumulative performance of 117%, as compared to the benchmark of 111. The fund also focus on large cap, high quality stocks similar to the conventional. With that, I end my presentation and I'll pass it back to the host. Over to you, Yvonne. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley, for the insightful presentation. Now we will proceed with the question and answer session. The first question would be, let me filter. Okay, it's about on the earlier presentation. Can you explain more about the annuity and is it available in Malaysia too?
Annuity is actually offered through the insurance company. So, to know more, you will have to actually contact, the respective insurance company. As I know, there are not many companies, that are offering annuity, but it is very common in other markets. So, for example, in the US, annuity is actually common, but in Malaysia, we don't see much of it. So that is also one of the reasons why the government is actually introducing PRS under Pillar 3, in addition to annuity as part of the Pillar 3 voluntary program.
I see. Thank you. We'll proceed with the next question. We have a question from YouTube. Is there PRS fund that solely invested in developed country?
Today, it depends on, what are the funds that you're looking at. Today, for us, we don't. If you look at the platforms that we have, right, the three funds that we have under default, or the do-it-myself is the growth, moderate, and conservative. So based on this, the asset allocation is actually fixed as per the SC guidelines. So growth, moderate, and conservative goes by the asset allocation of 80-20, 60-40, 20-80, and there is no fix in terms of develop. Today, I don't see any, developed market only funds, in the market. But, having said so, the market is always improving. There may be such funds, in the future.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is, why is the PRS Plus Asia Pacific ex-Japan Fund a feeder fund into the Asia Pac Dynamic Income Fund? Is this incurring an additional fee from PRS feeder fund on top of the target fund? And investing directly in the target fund instead of the PRS fund will incur less fee and hence a better return?
Under the SC guidelines, where we fit into a fund that is managed, within the company, right, we are not allowed to double charge. So in that sense, right, we are not double charging the management fee for both the funds.
Okay. I think that one clears some of our doubts. And then may we know that what do Islamic scheme invest in? Is it anyone can invest?
Yes, Islamic scheme, although it is Islamic, right? Anyone can actually invest in. The only difference between Islamic and conventional is that there is Islamic investment guidelines that the team will look into when making investment decision. For example, you're right, in Islamic investments, there is no weaponry, there's no things like not halal, non-halal items, Even banking stocks is not there. Only Islamic banks is in investments solutions. So that's the only difference between the conventional and the Islamic. Basically, it follows, the Sharia investment guidelines.
See, okay, thank you. And then we'll move on to the next question. Can you share how do you yourself prepare for retirement?
Myself, I have been investing in PRS since its launch. I can tell you that since 2012, I have also been investing. Apart from my EPF, I have my PRS, and I also have my other investments as well. So I consider myself a financial literate person with some education in financial. So I do my diversification. I have mine in EPF mainly. I also take out the money from EPF through EMIS, EPF MIS to actually boost the return, because EMIS you can take out 30% from there, redirect it to any of the funds that your choice, right, within the UT, and that gives you an option to actually generate better return. Because I consider myself young and I tend to be a risk taker. So the kind of funds that I am selecting tend to be a little bit more aggressive. So I will actually do that, as part of my retirement planning as well. So in addition, PRS is also something I put in. When it comes to retirement things for myself, I always believe in the discipline to save. Having discipline to save means you consistently save over monthly, doing a regular savings, because it is impossible for you to actually time market for long-term goal. Unlike short-term goal, you can actually time the market. A lot of us actually will lose that discipline, to actually monitor the market, monitor your investments for a 40-year kind of investments, So the key is really to put regular savings so that, you work on dollar cost averaging, and, the consistency, will also provide you with what I share, which is the most powerful tool in retirement savings, your compounding interest. Because imagine interest on interest, right? That actually gives you the better benefit. So as for myself, I also do salary deduction for my PRS as well. So that every, an X amount will go in. On top of that, as you know, PRS also have tax deduction. So when I do my, salary deduction, I also get tax benefit on that. So if you compute the tax return, the back tax benefit into it, it actually also boosts your overall return. Yeah.
I see. Thank you for the insightful. And then we'll move on to the next question. How to gain profit from PRS? Do you encourage to change fund like other unit trusts, or it will be better to maintain for a longer period?
Well, it depends how you have selected your fund in the first place. The kind of person, who actually time the market, monitor the market, consistently, so that if you are, then, maybe it makes sense for you to actually, switch from one fund to another and actually look into that. But many of us in reality, have little knowledge about market. We don't even know it's the right time to go. And, and most of us don't even know what is our right, risk and return profile. So for that, especially, for in a corporate scheme, we see a lot of people actually choosing into the default scheme. So the default scheme is where we will make the investment decision for you based on the SC guidelines. So as I mentioned earlier, right, the SC prescribed that if you are at a certain age, you will be put into, whether the growth or the moderate or the conservative. So people who have no knowledge on investments and still wants to have, some investments in PRS, this could be your choice. Self-selection is really for people who have the background in financial, who can and who wants to do that financial decision yourself. Then you can mix and match. So depending on the market, depending on your risk appetite, you can choose. It's very difficult to say which is the right model. It really depends on what is your level like, from a financial perspective. Not just that, how much, commitment, how much time can you put in to monitor your investment is also another consideration. Because like I mentioned, retirement is not something you invest for 1 year. It could be 20, 30, 40 years, can you or do you have that discipline and the time and the resources to really monitor your portfolio for 40 years and continuously, switch in and out? That is the question back to the investors.
Yeah, understand that. Thank you. And then move on to the next question. This is about the fund. Since Principal PRS Plus Asia Pacific ex-Japan Equity is a feeder fund for Principal PRS Plus Asia Pacific ex-Japan Equity, if we are already investing in Principal Asia Pacific Dynamic Income Fund via EPF, which Principal PRS is much more recommended to invest in?
Sorry, so these investors are saying that they already have APDI.
Yes, they have an APDI invested via EPF already. So they understand that the Principal Asia Pacific ex-Japan Equity is a feeder fund for the Asia Pacific ex-Japan Principal PRS Plus Asia Pacific ex-Japan Equity. So they're asking whether they should invest in PRS. Which one should they mirror the similar PRS fund, or should they not too? They choose another alternative.
Well, that is really the investor's choice, right? Ask me, personally, I am a person who looks into diversifications. So if you have APDI, via UT, you may also want to consider other funds in PRS. But of the end of the day, if you are happy with the return of APDI and in PRS, you can get the additional tax benefit and you want to reap that tax benefit, right? Then by all means. So at the end of the day, it's really your preference, that's why we, from a provider perspective, we provide you with the fund choices so that you can make the selection yourself,
Okay, understand that. And we'll move on to the next question is, we noticed that there is a PRS fund, there is a different class of Class A, Class C, and Class X. So may we know what is the difference of these classes?
Class A and C is actually for retail. One, has a lower management fee, and the other one is a higher management fee with a lower charge. Whereas Class X is really for our corporate. So, under corporate, this is where, the customers or the investors will invest through their HR and via a salary deduction. So Class X is specifically for them. And because they come in through salary deduction, at a regular basis, there is special arrangement on that. So a new class is actually set up.
I see. Okay, thank you. And then due to the time constraint, I think we will take the final questions for tonight's webinar. Let me go through with the questions. Okay, here is one question. Are there any plans to introduce funds that invest in other asset classes, such as real estate or gold or cryptocurrency and other, etc.?
Well, principal, yes, we have plans to actually introduce something new in the PRS. Share too much today, but look out, we are trying to introduce something new. Hopefully, next year you will see it from us.
Okay, thank you, Shirley. I believe most of us get a better understanding on PRS investment and the benefit of it from your insightful sharing. So if you have any further questions, please feel free to send us an email at investhelp.my@fundsupermart.com. The link is in the chat box. A replay of tonight's session will be available right after this. Head over to our YouTube page at FSMOne Malaysia to catch this replay. We'd like to take these chances to highlight there is a PRS campaign going on from 1st October till end of the month, 30th of November, whereby Principal Asset Management Berhad is one of the participating PRS provider for this campaign. For any new or existing PRS investor who invests a minimum of 3,000 in one PRS fund in a single transaction during the promotion period are eligible for 140 ringgit worth of Touch and Go e-wallet reload pin. For more information on this campaign, kindly click on the link provided in the chat box. Once again, thank you, Ms. Shirley, for joining us tonight, and thank you everyone for attending tonight's session. By this, we will end tonight's webinar. Take care and stay safe. Good night.